So there has been some discussion recently in the Discord about overall what order the games happen in. Although I've released a couple videos theorizing about the timeline in the past, I think it's time we take a look at all of the known information in the current state of Pikmin and clarify this timeline thing once and for all. Hello everybody, you're watching Variety Television and welcome to another Pikmin Theory. Before we get started, I have two announcements to make. First, a reminder that a live Pikmin Theory discussion will be coming in the near future. Nothing concrete yet, like a date or time, but more information will come soon. Second, I released a Sonic the Hedgehog theory very recently, and I'd love for you to check it out. The link is in the description. Sorry for taking up all that time, let's get into the timeline theory. The very first thing we need to do before we can start discussing what order the games happen in is lay down some groundwork to build this timeline on. I think the groundwork is going to be the most controversial part of this video, so it's also probably best if we get it out of the way for that reason as well. We can build up this timeline from two different angles. In my opinion, the first angle is taking all 6 of the mainline Pikmin games, yes 6, and trying to fit them into a linear narrative. This angle, honestly, is extremely complicated to tackle, and in many instances, the story contradicts itself or just doesn't make sense the way it is presented. That's why I offer to you Angle 2, the angle I have taken since the beginning, well, at least since the demo came out, and the angle that I believe makes the most sense overall. That is the idea that there are actually 2 timelines, and each happen independently of one another. To rephrase, each and every mainline game is canon and has a place on its respective, albeit separate, timeline. Now here we go. I think the easiest side of the timelines is what I like to call the classic timeline. If it isn't clear by now, I'm a pretty big fan of Sonic, so I borrowed the naming scheme from that game's fanbase, which includes myself, so I think that makes it okay. Anyways, the classic timeline, this is the one that most of us are actually the most familiar with, I would assume. This timeline goes like this: Pikmin 1, Pikmin 2, and Pikmin 3 Deluxe. And that's very specifically 3 Deluxe, not the Wii U version, and that is it as far as the classic timeline goes. It's very easy to understand, and there are clear and concise connecting points in each game to arrange them as such. Pikmin 3 Deluxe's side stories for Olimar let us in on the fact that Olimar has been to the planet twice before. Furthermore, Olimar directly references recovering the Pikmin 2 debt, so we can easily place Pikmin 3 Deluxe after Pikmin 2 and call it a day. It's not until the other timeline that I think things start to get a little more complicated. The other timeline is the one I refer to as the modern timeline, and I'll explain the order as well as why I think they go in said order as we go. For starters, I do not think Pikmin 1 or 2 from the classic timeline exist in the modern timeline. Instead, the modern timeline starts with Pikmin 4. There are many clues in Pikmin 4 that seem to represent the game being the start. Olimar tells his story as if it's the first time something like this has happened to him. On top of that, Olimar releases voyage logs about discovering Pikmin for the first time, tracking Pikmin behavior, and so on. This indicates that Olimar is experiencing all of this for the first time, but that's not all. We see Olimar dream of the events of Pikmin 2 during Pikmin 4. The fact that it is a dream of Pikmin 2, but Olimar doesn't recognize it as the events that have happened already, I think it's safe to say either Pikmin 2 hasn't happened yet in this timeline, or something else happens entirely, and I think it's the latter. Like I stated earlier, I don't think Pikmin 1 or 2 even exist in this timeline. I think the events we see happen in this sort of post-game of Pikmin 4 is meant to represent the modern timeline's version of Pikmin 2. It's very similar to the events of Pikmin 2, but reformed and retold to fit the Pikmin 4 version of the story. So the very first entry in the timeline is Pikmin 4. Next is the Wii U version of Pikmin 3. Notice how I differentiated the two. DLC exists for Pikmin 3, but it's not part of the base game. However, the DLC is very important to the lore and is part of the base game of 3 Deluxe. So I'm considering the two games as two separate timeline entries. The classic timeline has Deluxe, which includes the DLC, and the modern timeline has plain old Pikmin 3 with no DLC. This allows the events depicted in the DLC to still happen, and they are admittedly important to the classic timeline. However, all we know about Pikmin 3 in the modern timeline is that it happens. The Japanese website Pikmin Garden actually had a sort of timeline on events for Pikmin 4 before the game came out. It was all in Japanese, and each time I translated the page I got slightly different wording, but always the same idea. Basically, it says the events of Pikmin 4 happen, where Olimar has his incident crashing on PNF 404. There's a clarification that he did in fact hit a meteoroid, but it felt more as though he was pulled into the meteoroid and the planet rather than just being a crash. The next statement is that Planet Kopai sent an unmanned probe to PNF 404 looking for food shortly after the incident with Olimar. This is exactly the events we see happening at the start of Pikmin 3, so it has to happen after Pikmin 4 in this timeline. The events of the DLC simply don't line up with Pikmin 4, so that's another reason I'm using both versions of Pikmin 3 as separate entries here. After Pikmin 3 in the modern timeline is Hey Pikmin. There are certain events in Hey Pikmin that seem to hint that pretty much all of the gameplay segment was only a daydream, but there are events in Pikmin 4 that let us know that certain cutscenes, primarily the very opening and ending of Hey Pikmin, actually are canon and happen sometime after Pikmin 4. The clue from Hey Pikmin is a clarification during the ending cutscene that Olimar snapped out of his daydream as he approached Hakatate. This lets us easily dismiss the entire game as a dream, which is good because the game implies a lot. But the ending cutscene isn't a dream. Olimar is awake, and there's something interesting of note here. Olimar is piloting the Dolphin 2 still. The ship is still canon, and throughout Hey Pikmin, we must collect Sparklium to refuel the ship, which is probably at least an indication that the ship runs on Sparklium, even if the other stuff in the game didn't happen. In Pikmin 4, Shepard straight up tells Olimar that she will buy him a new ship with all the Sparklium they've collected so far. The SS Shepard runs on Sparklium, the Dolphin 2 is a new ship that runs on Sparklium. That connection is very clear. I believe the Dolphin 2 is the new ship that Shepard was referring to, and we see Olimar piloting it in the ending cutscene of Hey Pikmin. To summarize and simplify, Pikmin now exists on two timelines. The classic timeline consists of Pikmin 1, Pikmin 2, and Pikmin 3 Deluxe. The modern timeline consists of Pikmin 4, Pikmin 3 for Wii U, and Hey Pikmin. Specifically, the ending cutscene of Hey Pikmin, but you get the idea. I know this may seem complicated or even seem like a lot. Maybe it seems like I'm overthinking this, which I definitely am, but I think it makes the most sense for fitting every single mainline game and DLC into some sort of cohesive timeline. Let me know what you think down below, and don't forget to subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you for watching, but that's all I have for today's episode. Please stay tuned, Variety Television will be right back.